Good evening. On behalf of the Durham District School Board of Trustees, I'd like to welcome you to the September 7th Standing Committee meeting. I'd like to begin with the land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. Are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is approved as distributed. There are no community or Durham District School Board presentations tonight, so I will now call on Director Nora Marsh to provide us with the senior team update on return to school planning.
Thank you, Trustee Thatcher, and it's certainly a pleasure on behalf of the team to be here again with you, and know that it's been a very active few weeks for you and for our schools as we ready for students to return. We're very excited and understand, based on the last year and a half and the experiences, that lessons we've learned during that period, the importance of the welcoming students back and the transition back to learning this year. Like previous years, we are going to focus on the relationship building, connections with students, and appreciating that students will have varied experiences. And so the importance of knowing our students, listening to student voice, and going from there in terms of really actively growing our students, both from a mental health, well-being, and learning perspective. I know that during the pandemic, part of the narrative, there can be a tendency to focus on what was missed in terms of learning during the pandemic. We did track and keep track of the engagement of students during this period, understanding it was a different sort of learning. But most importantly, we want to make sure that as students come back, we celebrate who they are, their identities and their voices, and recognize that their lived experiences are such that they'll have some life experiences that really do set them apart in terms of lessons that they've learned and what they bring to the classroom. We will then work with that relationship and recognizing and honoring who they are and what they've been through in terms of creating an ambitious plan to grow them both academically and emotionally over the course of this year. I anticipate that there are many questions in terms of the logistics of the return to school, and for that reason, we have a very thorough update for you with a number of the senior team going to be coming forward in terms of walking you through what can be expected. But before I turn it over, I do want to say we're also thrilled by the opening of 2 new elementary schools to Durham this year. Of course, Willows Walk and Rosemary Brown, both ready to go, and just thrilled and looking forward to seeing students in those classrooms and hallways by the end of this week. So Durham does continue to grow in response to community growth that we're really very excited about, and both builds have been very thoughtfully done in terms of the work that facilities did, as well as the staff and the school staff in terms of thinking about welcoming students into those new environments. Staff were in there very early getting the classroom set up into making sure that they had that welcoming, personalized approach to them. So tonight, I'm going to turn it over first to Associate Director Markovsky, who's going to walk you through some operational health and safety protocols, reviewing some of what was in existence last year, and then adding whatever is new for this year, but just wanting to make sure we touched upon some of the big ones from last year to confirm that they're the same when they Associate Director Wright will then walk you through more from a facility perspective, understanding ventilation and the questions around ventilation, and so provide an update in terms of the work we've done there, as well as other safety precautions that we are using in terms of other uses of schools as an example. And we'll talk briefly about DSTS update as well. From there, we'll turn it over to Superintendent Mundy, who will talk more about the vaccination declaration that we are still receiving memos about today in terms of the staff declaration of whether or not they've been vaccinated and the protocols that we will follow. Part of the update from Associate Director Markowski will also include a pilot that Durham is part of in terms of student rapid testing. And so you'll get more information in terms of those elements of it. We'll then turn it over more from a program perspective to Superintendent Macaulay, who will talk a little bit about special education, small class placements, and the focus on mental health as we welcome students back into the environment, and staff, recognizing everyone has been through some challenging times during the pandemic, and that it's a new year and an opportunity for us to restart with many individuals. From Superintendent Macaulay, we'll continue on the program theme, turning it over to Superintendents Nevels and Davis to talk more about virtual schooling, as well as some other specific elements related to secondary operations from an extracurricular perspective, as well as the secondary school timetable. So with that introduction, I'm very pleased to turn it over to Associate Director Markowski, who will start the speakers off, and then we'll go from there without introduction in between each. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh, and good evening, trustees. As Director Marsh had pointed out, I just want to provide you with a bit of an overview in relation to our health and safety and operational items. At the end, I will turn it over to Superintendent Mundy, who will also talk about our vaccination disclosure protocol. As you're aware, at the beginning of August, we received updated guidance from the ministry in relation to our reopening plans for schools for the 21-22 school year. We have since updated our necessary protocols and updated our COVID-19 guide for schools. It's a public-facing document that's on our website now, and it contains all our various health and safety measures that have been updated to reflect the new guidance. I do want to talk a bit about masking. I know that's a common question that comes up, just highlighting sort of expectations surrounding masking, and then just slightly talk also about cohorting. Then I'll walk you through some vaccination data that's been provided by our public health unit and some of the measures that are being taken to help support those efforts. So as you're aware, the Ministry of Education has made mask wearing mandatory for all students in grades 1 to 12. We're also encouraging students in kindergarten to wear masks. Although mask wearing is considered voluntary in kindergarten, we are anticipating a high level of compliance. Staff will be gently modeling and reinforcing mask wearing in the kindergarten program. And we do recognize, however, that some kindergarten students may not be developmentally ready to adhere to strict masking protocols. In relation to transportation, all of our students that take busing or are taking any transportation are required to wear a mask to board and ride the bus. Really, the only exceptional circumstances for masking being approved are when students have a medical documentation exception, and there is a process that schools will be following to work with those families in those circumstances. In the event that a student does not have their own personal masks, non-medical masks are readily available for distribution. We're also encouraging students to bring their own reusable masks from home. Non-medical masks, for example, cloth masks that can be washed daily, or a medical mask, such as a surgical mask, are both acceptable for students on a day-to-day basis. In relation to DDSB staff, we do require that all staff wear board-approved PPE, which includes a disposable non-medical mask, and non-board personnel entering our building, including family members, also must be masked, and those are all captured within our COVID-19 guide for schools. One change from the guide from last year that I do want to emphasize is that the updated guidance does not require that students remain within their cohort in the outdoors. So there is additional flexibility in relation to recess time and other outdoor times, with not, we would say, strict measures for students to be within their cohorts. Obviously, the cohorting will continue in the indoors, and that becomes an integral structure in terms of how we operate in our schools throughout the year until further guidance is provided. In relation to vaccination rates, I want to just take a minute to provide you with an update on vaccination rates within the Durham region. We were informed by DRHD, our public health unit, that as of September 1st, 67% of our 12 to 17-year-olds in Durham are fully vaccinated, and 76.6% have received at least one dose. This is slightly less than the regional data for all eligible age groups, which sits at 75.4% for fully vaccinated and 80.7% for having at least one dose. So in relation to some of the efforts we are doing in partnership with DRHD to increase vaccination rates, the Ontario government is working with all public health units and publicly funded school boards to plan and host vaccination clinics in or near schools to continue the fight against COVID-19. These clinics are open to all eligible students, staff, and unimmunized family members of the high school and its elementary feeder schools as well. As a region, we will be responsible, so the Durham Region Health Department will be responsible for establishing the schedule for clinics and also prioritizing the schools with an earlier start and schools that reside in geographical areas where we know that vaccination rates are low. The clinics will be walk-in in nature and operate from 4:30 to 7:30. Our first clinics will be hosted this week. This evening, we actually had clinics that were held at Maxwell Heights and Henry Street. And on Friday, we have clinics that are going to be offered at GL Roberts and DAS in the Oshawa campus. On Saturday, there'll be clinics hosted in our northern region at Brock High School, Port Perry, and Uxbridge. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about a test pilot program that the Durham region and our Durham School Board is part of. The Ministry of Education announced a new school testing pilot program in August to support those who have been identified as needing testing under provincial COVID-19 guidance. The ministry has designated 4 DDSB secondary schools to participate. So that's Ajax High School, J. Clark Richardson, Pickering High School, and Port Perry. And really through this pilot, students and staff who are vaccinated and asymptomatic will receive a take-home self-isolation kit when they've been identified as a high-risk contact as part of an identified cohort or outbreak. The pilot phase would launch the week of September 7th, which is this week, and it will run for a total of 8 weeks, and it'll end approximately the week of October 29th. Students, staff, and families will continue to have the option to seek testing through their local assessment center or specimen collection center, or the option to isolate as required. Take-home kits will be provided to school sites, and schools would be responsible for receiving, storing, and distributing the kits when identified and directed by public health. Superintendent Mundy, I'll turn it over to you to talk about our vaccination disclosure protocol.
Thank you. As per ministry direction, we have been working with our vendor to create a vaccination disclosure attestation, and it will be housed within our employee self-serve portal. An email went out just recently today to let all staff know the information necessary to complete that attestation. We expect that all staff will complete the attestation. Human Resource Services will be gathering the data on the vaccination disclosure. Those who indicate they are not fully vaccinated will be required to complete rapid testing twice per week. Employees who do not have a medical reason will also be required to complete an educational program on COVID vaccines, which the ministry will provide. For frequent visitor or third parties that have contact with staff or students, we have provided all the requirements and information for them to meet the requirements set out by the ministry. We will be collecting confirmation that all of their staff or students that are in our schools are following those requirements. We will also be collecting data as part of the ministry reporting. Data will be depersonalized and aggregate, and that information will be provided to the ministry on September 10th and then provided publicly on our website on September 15th. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody. I have a few updates from the corporate services, facility services side, starting with ventilation, as ventilation has been a big topic of conversation since the start of the pandemic, and that's continued over the summer months. The Ministry of Education did issue revised ventilation standards and guidance on August the 4th. Comforting in that new guidance was the fact that DDSB already was largely in compliance with the revised standards. We had reviewed the operations of all of our HVAC systems in all of our schools to ensure they were functioning optimally and as designed. We had already upgraded to MERV 13 level filtration at all of our school sites. We had increased the rate of fresh air exchange in all ventilated spaces, including a full purge of air before and after occupancy. And we had started a program of duct cleaning at our schools to ensure we were circulating clean air free from obstruction. Overall, our board's in really good shape in terms of our facilities being mechanically ventilated. We do have a small number of facilities that would be considered exhaust ventilation or not mechanically ventilated, and are therefore required to have HEPA level air filtration units installed in those spaces. So these spaces have had HEPA units installed in them. We actually did the installation last year in advance of the requirement. And the biggest change to the guidance over the summer really was the introduction of similar HEPA air filtration units being installed or placed into kindergarten classrooms. So thankfully, we have secured enough units early enough to meet the number of classrooms that we were required to have these units installed in, and they have been deployed across the system. We have ordered a significant number of additional units that we will deploy throughout the system to use as spares or to provide to schools for areas at the discretion of school administrators that may be of particular concern. And the last piece on ventilation that I'll mention is that the ministry has provided a ventilation measures report template that you can find on our website. We have completed it and posted, and it includes school specific information on ventilation and ventilation systems. Moving to portables, as part of the federal COVID related infrastructure funding, DDSB secured funds to purchase 30 new portables this year. Unfortunately, due to supply chain and shipping issues, our portables have not yet been received. We do expect them over the coming weeks. Because the portables generally were being purchased to replace existing portables, there's not a significant immediate impact. However, enrollment increases at 7 of our schools are requiring 8 classes total across those 7 schools to be accommodated in what would be otherwise common spaces, so libraries or gymnasiums. So just in the short term. We have received a number of questions about the upcoming federal election. We were in touch with Elections Canada pretty early on, so I would say we've been in contact with them since early in the spring, preparing for the eventual election call. There were a number of site visits that took place in order to review which sites Elections Canada might like to use, but we didn't commit to using our schools as polling stations, pending information from the Ministry of Education. The information from the ministry came fairly late in the game, and Elections Canada had needed to move forward securing their polling stations, and so our schools will not be used as polling stations for the coming federal election. In terms of custodial cleaning, we've worked closely with Durham Region Health to create custodial cleaning lists for both elementary and secondary schools. Really similar to last year in terms of the expectations for cleaning. The nuance, of course, is that secondary schools will be learning in person all day. And so them being large facilities, we need to make some adjustments. So again, high touch areas will be cleaned twice a day, washrooms cleaned on an ongoing basis, as well as cafeterias will be a focus during lunch. In terms of community use of schools and the use of our facilities, external community permits are not being issued at this time. We know that our communities rely heavily on accessing schools to support their activities. And as publicly funded institutions, we agree the access is important. That being said, our first priority is the health and safety of our students and our staff, and we want to ensure we have the resources to maintain our facilities in that regard. before we move more forward, opening up facilities further. So we are keeping an eye on community use of schools. And lastly, transportation. I did touch base with the CAO of Durham Student Transportation Services today. She said they've only received about 1,000 phone calls today, literally just answering general questions of family concerns as they prepare to return to school. So I've already seen news articles circulating about driver shortages in other areas of the province. Thankfully, all of the operators that service DDSB have reported that they have enough drivers to cover all of our scheduled routes at this time. The supply driver pool isn't quite as strong as we'd like to see, or DSTS would like to see. But DSTS commented they did feel we're starting from a fairly strong position, and that going with the secondary 10 to 4 bell times for the coming year is a very big contributing factor to that strong position. And those are my updates. Thanks. On to you, Superintendent McCauley.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. Key to our planning for school start was ensuring that all of our families had authentic choice between in-person and virtual learning. Responsive to survey responses, adjustments were made to our special education programs, and a few of them were added to DDSB at home. That includes our practical learning program, students accessing life skills, the school support program, developmental program running virtually, as well as our elementary gifted program. Based on individual student needs, the DDSB at home team also includes an adjustment to CERT, educational assistance, and an ASL interpreter. We'd like to thank educators across the district who returned early to provide in-school transition visits for students. Transition supports also included central staff such as our orientation and mobility specialist. Through the first 8 weeks of the school year, 18 additional EA positions and additional speech path positions specific to our kindergarten students accessing through DDSB at home are funded by the trustee approved 40% draw on the special education reserve. The foundation of a mentally healthy return to the school year is grounded in relationships, as Director Marsh mentioned in her opening remarks. Moving into this school year, focus is on co-creating environments that prioritize connection, where caring and respectful relationships create the conditions for all to thrive. This year, as with last year, the focus is on developing caring, attuned relationships that will be key to the success of students, families, and team members across the district. Connection before curriculum puts our focus on the interactions that allow the time for staff, students, caregivers, and families to reconnect or build or reestablish relationships with one another, where we allow for time to get to know each other once again, allow for collaboration, idea sharing, as well as emotional support. Our school teams are focusing on the foundations of a mentally healthy classroom, the first 20 days and beyond of creating connection and well-being as a guide. As we re-engage in learning, we focus on the foundations of mentally healthy classrooms and leveraging the power of connections to support student and educator relationships while deepening partnerships with families. It also will contribute to making our classrooms more inclusive and equitable learning environments. This is a foundation to a positive mental health and well-being focus, and our students consolidating their preparedness to learn in the 21-22 school year. Over to my DDSB at home colleagues.
Thank you. This is an update for DDSB at home elementary. We're happy to welcome approximately 6,000 students to DDSB at home elementary.
Recording in progress.
We sent communication home to our families last week with information about logins, the web page, and an introduction to our principals and vice principals. We will be having 6 campuses again this year: early years, a 1-2, a 3-4, a 5-6, a 7-8 campus, and a French immersion campus. The administration and clerical staff have been working hard to ensure families feel welcome, to assign students to classrooms and to hire educators. Staff have been taking time during the professional activity days to continue to learn about effective pedagogy and centering human rights, Indigenous rights, equity, and well-being in how we learn, plan, act, observe, and assess our teaching and learning. We will also continue to collect feedback through avenues such as thought exchange during the year and use this information to be responsive and to plan forward. Thank you to all parents and staff for your patience, learning stance, and support while we prepare for what looks like it will be an exciting school year. Now over to Superintendent Neville.
Thank you. The current secondary enrollment is just under 1,900 students. Following the final opportunity to declare their learning preference, we saw approximately 500 students who had previously chosen virtual choose in-person learning as their learning preference, an additional 450 approximately who made the change to come to virtual. As a result, the staff at DDSB at Home Secondary have been working diligently to create timetables for the 450 new virtual students. Creating timetables, as you know, often requires contacting parents and students to discuss course options and pathways and resolve potential course conflicts. To complete their teacher roster for the school year, the team has also been working hard to interview and hire 23 teachers new to Durham District School Board at Home Secondary. Students at DDSB at Home Secondary will follow a similar day schedule to the one they followed last year, including 3 75-minute classes and a study hall period, and will begin on the first day with their introduction to the virtual learning platform. Students in our secondary in-person schools will receive timetables with 2 classes per quadmester in alignment with ministry guidelines, and students will attend 1 class for the full morning and a different class for the full afternoon. In terms of sports, we are working closely with both the Lake Ontario Secondary School Athletic Association and our Durham Elementary Athletic Association to gradually return to group physical activity and sport. For information, our Secondary Athletic Association comprises a total of 34 secondary schools, including the majority of secondary schools in Durham District and Durham Catholic, Peterborough, Victoria, Northumberland, and Clarington Catholic, Kawartha Pine Ridge, and also includes 3 other individual secondary schools from other boards. At this time, as we progress safely, we've made the decision to keep both elementary and secondary school sports local and not participate in any provincial competitions or tournaments. We will follow the specific direction provided by the ministry and encourage as many sports as possible to take place outdoors. At this time, we're working with our provincial associations and the local health department for additional guidance on the delivery of inter-school sports and organized athletics. We are currently investigating alternatives for some sports that traditionally run in the fall to run in the spring, and other higher contact sports to be modified to still allow competitive play with measures for safety. For both elementary and secondary, indoor masked intramural sports will resume for no contact, low cardio sports, and outdoor intramurals may resume unmasked with no contact and physical distancing. We're very excited to be able to return to the many sports that students love, and will do so in a way that follows all ministry and public health guidelines, continuously monitoring the current COVID situation and adjusting as needed to maintain safety within the changing environment. Thank you, and I'll return the microphone to Director Marsh.
Thank you. So the other thing, just wanted to flag, and it will probably come up in more detail later with Associate Director Markowski's update on staffing, but we did benefit from enrollment increase. You may recall that in the spring we had less kindergarten students than we would normally. And so right now it would appear that we have approximately 2,700 new registrations for this school year, and most of them at the primary level. And I'm saying it would appear because, as you know, every September we always need to confirm the registrations by physical attendance of students. So this week and next week, Associate Director Markowski and team will be reviewing very carefully the attendance of students. The trustees had passed during the budget process reserve funding of $5 million for us to assist with large classes and other COVID-related specific interventions to assist with safety in schools, given that there wasn't significant funding coming through other channels. That fund we are, for the most part, have not made use of yet, because we want to make sure, as enrollment will fluctuate, that we're actually putting it where it's going to make the most difference in terms of reducing classes that need to be reduced. So over the course of this month, you'll hear more about that, but we are waiting until we see those students physically. So I know that this has been a lot of information, and we're very happy to take questions of clarification or perhaps questions on topics we did not address. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh, and thank you to the senior team. Do we have some questions? I see Trustee Lundquist and Trustee, followed by Trustee Morton. Go ahead, Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. So I appreciate this this update. I have to admit that I'm a little bit concerned. I'm a little bit concerned about a bunch of different things. So one of the interesting things, one of the things I thought was interesting is reference to people in the authentic choice in the context of making decisions around their children, or the children in their care. And I'm not sure that I would have put my child in school in the circumstances that we now find ourselves in. And if I had known in August that physical distance wasn't a thing right now, if I had known that masking at lunchtime while they're in cafeterias was going to be okay. Like, I'm not clear that people actually have had authentic choice. Truly, I don't know how you have that without understanding what protocols are in place. And I'm not sure that that was well communicated. That's my sense as a parent, at least. But I just want to make reference to what I'm concerned about in terms of what was discussed tonight specifically. So, I recognize that the science table has been very clear about certain things, like the importance of having kids in school, the importance to mental health, and all of those things. And I agree with those things. But they also talk about where there's low risk, medium risk, high risk, and we might move through that. And I don't see any plan that actually addresses where there's low, right now I assume that we're working from the presumption that we're in a low risk stage. That's not what is likely to be occurring in the fall when we return to classes, with a rise in the number of cases and a variant of concern, Delta. We have a large population of unvaxxed children. They're not eligible, so under 12, and then we still have a fairly significant number of eligible students, 25 to 30%, that aren't fully vaxxed. And so I guess what I would like to know is, have we turned our minds to sort of contingency plans if the numbers I understand public health directives are part of this, but those are bare legal minimums, and I'm worried that we're doing the bare legal minimum because the government hasn't provided appropriate funding to do more than the bare legal minimum. So do we have plans if the risk level changes, medium risk, high risk? Have we turned our minds to what classes might look like in order to keep kids in classes?
Through you, Chair. So we have been meeting regularly throughout August, both with the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the province as well as DRHD. And one of the things that we're hearing very clearly, you're right about the importance of schools staying open, but also that there may be more local direction from medical officers of health. That's the expectation of the Chief Medical Officer of Health, so that we can be responsive to local circumstances. I think that what the province is trying to avoid is the same solution across the province if we see some things evolving in certain areas. And that's one of the reasons, for example, that while with extracurricular activities, while we're going to pursue the avenue of looking at what's possible, as an example, in the provincial return to guide, they would have us return immediately to all extracurriculars and suggest unmasked high contact within a school setting is appropriate. You'll notice tonight that Superintendent Nevels did not articulate that. We're aware that other medical officers of health to the east of us, as well as to the west of us, have indicated that locally they don't think that's appropriate. So we're working, and we continue to ask Durham Region Health and Dr. Kyle in terms of ensuring that when we're looking at the situation in Durham, that we're doing our very best in terms of those safety protocols. One of the reasons why we have currently sat on the reserve fund is because we want to establish that physical distancing as much as possible in those elementary classrooms where we know that they're currently not eligible for a vaccination. We have heard through the provincial avenue that the testing in terms of the vaccination for under 12-year-olds is going very well. And we're actually very optimistic based on comments from the Deputy Minister that we may have a vaccination opportunity prior to December in terms of, so that's earlier than had been previously predicted. The province has been very clear that vaccination is the #1 thing we can do. So continuing to focus on Durham Region Health Department in terms of those who are eligible, because the more who are vaccinated who are eligible, community spread will go down. So we're sort of doing our best to try to balance it out. We're not in the driver's seat around those medical decisions, though. We continue to seek guidance from both the province and the local medical officer of health. And I need to be very clear that the province has indicated very clearly that they expect the local medical officers of health to deviate from their direction, the ministry's direction, where local circumstances indicates that they should be.
If I may, Madam Chair, I have a supplemental.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to try to squash it into one question because I recognize that's all I get. So I would like somebody to respond to a question about lockers. I've had a significant number of students actually reach out and ask questions about why can we gather in a cafeteria but not go to our lockers. So that's one piece of that. But my questions are more specifically about two issues. One, like I'm a little bit confused, and maybe this is not the right time and I can send a question in about cohorting. Like it doesn't make sense to me that you're talking about cohorting inside and not outside, because cohorting is a group of students and that doesn't make sense. Like it just actually doesn't make logical sense to say you're cohorting inside but not outside. So you're either not or you are. You can't have it both ways. So I'm puzzled by that assertion. And then the second piece that I'm a little bit concerned about maybe is this idea that we're requiring staff to use board-approved PPE, even though there may be a possibility that they have actually better quality PPE than what we're providing. And so I understand that the recommendations in the directives from public health are about, N95s to aerosol generating procedures, but I also recognize, having been involved in some of those cases early on, that was really about the availability of N95s. And I know that we don't have those and we're not required to have them, but I don't understand why we would be resistant to having staff provide higher quality PPE for themselves. I just don't understand why that would be an issue at all. So if maybe someone could explain that to me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to get it started, and then I anticipate that people are going to jump in particular, Associate Director Markowski. So in terms of the cohorting, I think one of the things that the Chief Medical Officer of Health has articulated is that the risk outside is minimum. And so for that reason, the opportunity to not necessarily stick with your cohort changes. And so it's a risk management strategy that they have deemed is appropriate currently for outside. That may change as situations evolve. In terms of secondary, the intent isn't really that it is a discrete cohort currently. We were told we had to go quadmester, where it was only 2 courses per day. But the reason for that wasn't because they were trying to protect students in terms of one cohort and two cohorts and the number of contacts within those two cohorts. The ministry has very clearly indicated they know that at lunchtime, on hallways, extracurriculars, that there is no sense of cohorting. The reason why they've mandated for us, at least for the first semester until the end of January, to only do 2 courses is should the risk change and things evolve, then they anticipate we could actually return more to a schedule like we had last year, where it would be 1 in-person cohort for secondary and virtually in the afternoon for the second part of the secondary day. So it's anticipation of a potential risk management strategy should the situation evolve, but it's not to say that that will happen. So that is the explanation of cohorting, because we did ask those questions as well in terms of the ministry direction to us. Lockers, students can use lockers. So Associate Director Murkowski, I'm not sure if you'd like to follow up on that. And you may also wish to follow up. I'll just say briefly around the masking. It has been one of the things that came back to us in terms of staff who may have access to PPE that we currently provide the medical PPE that is used in hospitals. So it's not that our PPE isn't such that it is of a high standard. One of the risks involved in N95, as the example, is if they haven't been fitted appropriately by a professional to the individual, they actually pose more of a risk to the individual and aren't as much protection. So there's more variance in terms of then, are they effective or not, whether or not they've been professionally fitted to the individual who's wearing them. And so we don't have the same capacity to manage the fitting for staff in terms of N95, nor are we authorized to provide it. But I think the other part of it is that the Ministry of Health has said very clearly it is only under very certain circumstances that N95s are even used in hospital settings. So that is the direction to us currently, not to allow N95, and that is a provincial direction. And Associate Director Markovsky, I'll turn it over to you because you may wish to add about the lockers and anything else I've missed.
Thank you, Director Marsh. You actually provided a very fulsome explanation in relation to the lockers, Trustee Lundquist. The direction that we provided is that lockers may be used. The expectation if students are sharing lockers, this sometimes occurs in our secondary schools, more frequently in our elementary schools, that students should be sharing with a student in their same cohort. That all being said, in terms of access to lockers throughout the day, we would rely on kind of local school procedures in terms of what that looks like. There isn't any central guidance that's been provided to that. We would expect that all schools would be adhering to any of the health and safety guidance that's been provided. And other than that, in relation to the masks, the only thing I would build on that Director Marsh touched on is that all of the masks that we use are in direct advice that we receive from our public health professionals. Really, the recommendation has been right now that we use a 3-layer medical mask, and that is pretty much in alignment to what's being used in hospitals, including with patients that are suspected and confirmed of COVID-19. So there's a certain standard that all of our PPE has that we would align to in terms of accessing to our staff. And she touched on the N95 piece, which I won't elaborate on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
If I may, Madam Chair,
Markovsky.
can I just say one thing quickly, please,
Trustee Lundquist, I'll just go to Trustee Morton, and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead, Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Superintendent Monday was talking about the vaccination disclosure of staff. She did not mention how the trustees would proceed. So could we discuss that a little bit, Superintendent Monday?
Sure, if you're comfortable, Chair Thatcher, I'm going to start. because Superintendent Mundy has really been leading the way with late-breaking information and direction from the Ministry of Education, understanding that the first priority is to get the declaration from staff who will be in schools on Thursday with students, and knowing that that is of community interest. So we have not communicated to trustees yet, nor have we communicated to other individuals who it will pertain to them in terms of having to declare their vaccination status, for the very reason that we've received the more specific direction memos Friday, I think it was at 5 p.m. and today at 3 p.m. So we'll have more information for trustees as well as others that it will pertain to. Our first focus was getting the rollout so that we have information in terms of the school setting and direct service to staff right away. So Superintendent Mundy, I'm not sure if you have anything further to add to that at this stage. By tomorrow afternoon, we will.
Supplemental, Trustee Morton?
No, that's fine, and thank you for that answer.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to go back to Trustee Lundquist. Nikki, go ahead with your comment.
Yeah, mine was just really quick. I just wanted to just say thank you to Brooklyn High School because they had done a remarkable job of answering these questions today. So they had on their Instagram page, on their stories, just a really remarkable question and answer feed all day long, really responsive to parents. And I got a ton of emails referencing it. And I just thought it was important to acknowledge that they were doing really incredible work on this.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I am not seeing, I just want to check carefully that I haven't missed anyone with the new system here. I don't, oh, I do see another. Trustee Stone, go ahead with your question or comment.
Thank you through you, Chair. Just wondered if you could quickly go over again what happens when children are, when a student is in elementary level or I guess high school level, if they are not vaccinated and they're showing signs of possible COVID, what happens? And then somebody who is not who is vaccinated and is showing possible signs of COVID, what happens with the isolation, et cetera? Is one isolate and one not? Could you just go over that, please?
Dr. Marsh, do you want me to speak to that? Thank you. So Trustee Stone, in both cases, if the student is symptomatic, as you're describing, they would be required to isolate and follow the necessary protocol.
What about siblings?
So again, depending on whether they're symptomatic or not, or vaccinated or not, we would follow the protocols that have been shared through our public health unit in terms of case and contact management. But really, without understanding kind of whether what grade they're in, DRHD would need to confirm whether they're vaccinated or not, if they're asymptomatic or not, and then there would be kind of a flow chart that we would follow in terms of how it is that we follow through the case and contact management.
Thank you, Associate Director Markowski. I'm not seeing any more questions or comments. I just had a quick question. Associate Director Markowski, you did mention those who would not be vaccinated due to a medical concern, but I was wondering about those who might not choose to do that for religious reasons. That was something that I saw somewhere. I was just wondering how we would deal with that. Have we had that situation arise?
Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. Now, is this in reference to our vaccination disclosure policy?
Yes.
So Superintendent Mundy, I'm not sure if you would like to just talk about that. There is a process through the attestation that if they do disclose that they are not vaccinated, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Mundy just to share a few words in relation to that.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. If someone has we follow the exact language from the ministry. So it is fully vaccinated, not fully vaccinated with medical, Not fully vaccinated, it would be the third. If someone is looking for, additional reasons related to code, we have a process that they can contact us through Human Resource Services, and certainly we'll work through the individual concerns and appropriately support. So we'll absolutely look at each case individually and work to sort through what is necessary and required.
Thank
We
you.
have through you, Chair Thatcher, if I made a supplemental, we have a draft protocol that we will be putting on the website as well that confirms that the board obviously would honor its duty to accommodate, but we do emphasize to the point of undue hardship and the importance of safety, and there may be the cases where we can't accommodate.
Thank you, Superintendent Mundy and Councillor Cotter. I'm now, again, I'm not seeing any hands, questions or comments. So moving on in the agenda, there are no recommended actions this evening. So moving on to item 9, information items. I'd like to welcome our 3 new student trustees, James Kay, Demario Knowles, and Kayla Malcolm. And just if I might just ask you a question before we begin. In the past, we have asked the trustees in what order your presentations might be happening. Is that something that we'll continue to do? Will I ask who will begin and in what order you'll be presenting?
Yes, I think that would still work.
Still apply. Thank
Yeah.
you, Kayla. So who will begin tonight?
I will begin tonight.
Thank you, Demario. Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, we'd like to take an opportunity to introduce ourselves to the team. So we'll start with me. Hi, everyone. My name is Demario Knowles. I'm a grade 12 student, and I will be representing Oshawa and Whitby. My pronouns are he, him, and I will also be the chair of the Equity Working Group for this year. I'll pass it off to James to speak next.
Thank you, Demario. Through you, Madam Chair, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is James Kay, and I'm a grade 12 student at Brock High School and the student trustee for North Durham. I'm very excited and honored to be representing the students of Brock, Scugog, and Uxbridge Townships at the board, and to be leading the Student Success Working Group on the Student Senate. I'm looking forward to working with the Durham District School Board, the Student Senate, and the Board of Trustees to advocate for students and to improve the student experience. Thank you, and I'll pass it off to Kayla.
Thank you, James. Through you, Madam Chair, I am Kayla Malcolm. I am a grade 12 student at Dunbarton High School, and I'll be representing the West region, so Pickering and Ajax. And I will also be chairing the Student Voice Working Group this year. And I cannot wait for this experience and to work with the Board of Chairs and the Durham District School Board. We do not have a formal report tonight because for us, school is starting on Thursday. James has started already, but because the 3 of us haven't been able to gather a full report, we decided that tonight we would just do our introductions. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair Morton, did you want to say a word or two?
I would just say welcome to our 3 student trustees. And if we were in the boardroom, I'd be asking you to stand and we would acknowledge your presence, but I'm just very thankful that you are able to join us tonight. Thank you.
So on behalf of the Durham District School Board of Trustees and Director Marsh and the senior team, welcome and looking forward to hearing what you have to say in the future. All right, then moving on now to information item B and calling on Associate Director Markowski for the update to elementary staffing and enrollment for 21-22.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher, the report begins on page 1 of your package this evening. The report is intended to provide you with an overview of elementary and secondary staffing and enrollment. As has been past practice, the ministry has stipulated specific staffing requirements for the 21-22 school year. These are captured for you on page 1 in the background section of the report. I won't go over everything, but they are pretty much the primary class size requirements and the other averages for each of the elementary divisions that have been shared with you previously. We initially staffed the system in March of 2021 based on ministry direction at that time. Afterwards, in the spring of 2021, shortly after, the DDSB conducted a survey of families to determine the number of students who would be attending regular face-to-face school and the number of students attending virtual school for the 21-22 school year. So this occurred back in May when we had the first reach out to our families to identify their learning preferences for their children for the 21-20 school year. When that information was gathered, we staffed or restaffed actually the system at that time and aligned our staffing to the new enrollment figures that were provided. Just want to take a moment to walk you through it and just sort of get an understanding of where we are and where we will be going in the days and weeks ahead. This process again allowed for families to have preference for their children based on the changing conditions as a result of the pandemic planning in Ontario and specifically within the Durham region. In order to be responsive to these changing conditions and to be responsive to families, a decision was made to allow families to revisit their preference in August. A survey was sent out to allow families to update their preference between virtual and in-person learning. And in order to ensure that we capture the data from these preference surveys, an extension to the deadline was allowed for a further 4 days. During the first 3 weeks of August, when we came back after the civic holiday weekend, we gathered the updated data from the family surveys and adjusted staffing allocations accordingly. So with that new updated information that was gathered from families, we actually restaffed again where needed, and we've captured our current enrollment and staffing situation on page 2 and 3 of the report. And everything is outlined there for you for both elementary and secondary. We presently have a total of 53,713 elementary students, where 6,006 are registered for DDSB at home. That's roughly speaking, approximately 11.2% of our population in elementary. And for secondary, we have a total of 22,379. And of that, 1,880, approximately 8.4% of our secondary student population is learning virtually. And again, these numbers are as a result of the updated survey. I do want to point out as well that Director Marsh shared earlier in her update, we have had a significant amount of new registrations. I believe last week at some point we were at about 2,700, which have had a significant impact in terms of classroom organizations, in particular in the elementary level. So on page 3, you'll also note we've included some specific information regarding our special education programming. I won't go through all of that with you, but the details are captured within. And one thing I do want to stress is that the staffing and enrollment process right now is very much fluid at this point. We are waiting for our regular calendar schools to begin school this Thursday, and at which time we will get a better understanding of actual student enrollment data. We will continue to monitor our enrollments and make adjustments as necessary once our numbers are confirmed, and we'll be able to provide you with further updates once school is underway. I do want to share with you too, through our Human Resources and Operations Department, we're very closely monitoring our schools right now and where enrollment and staffing figures are, in particular in our kindergarten and grades 4 to 6 classrooms. We know that, for example, in grades 7 to 12, because there is vaccination eligibility, and in grades 1 to 3, because there's a primary class size model that we follow, our pressure points tend to be in the kindergarten and grades 4 to 6 area. We've identified a list of schools that we're monitoring. We're going to be monitoring them, as Director Marsh said, Thursday and Friday into next week. And depending on what the actual enrollment data is versus the projected, we will act accordingly in terms of where we need to address staffing points, pressure points. I should also mention that we've established a procedure for reviewing individual requests from families who are requesting a change in learning preferences for their students. I think it's important to highlight that. Although we're not currently in a position to make a wide-scale change without adversely impacting our staffing allocation, We're always trying to work with our families and make accommodations, in particular in those cases where they're experiencing exceptional circumstances. So that marks the end of our report, and I want to thank you for your attention and support, and I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Associate Director Markowski. Just, I see Carolyn, and then Donna, Chair Morton, and Trustee Edwards on the speakers list. I'll begin with you, Chair Morton.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first one regards kindergarten, and I'm pleased to see that 90% of our classes have 29 or fewer students, but I'd like to know the average number of students in our kindergarten class.
So thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher. Trustee Morton, as it stands today, on my most recent update, our average class size in kindergarten is 24.54. And again, these are not knowing who will show up come Thursday onward. This is an average based on the data that we know.
I need to say then that I'm very pleased with that average. My second question is coming from page 3, the DAS staff. I'm in DAS occasionally, and I have a feeling for the number of staff members that we have there. So I'm really questioning the 3.58 FTE for DAS.
Thank you, and again, through you, Trustee Thatcher. Trustee Morton, what I will do is I will turn it over to Superintendent Nevels, who oversees the DAS portfolio, if he wanted to just comment on our DAS staffing.
Thank you. We'll have to check on that data because I had the same kind of recollection tonight when I was looking at the report as we were going through it. So we'll have to follow up on that and get back to you.
Thank you. I would appreciate having that feedback.
Thank you, Associate Director Markowski and Superintendent Nevels. Go ahead, Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. Trustee Morton kind of asked one of my questions. So I just curious on the chart around elementary staffing, it says special education classes. Does that include gifted as far as the classes are concerned? I note that we have gifted classes at home. And then I have a question around French immersion. Do we have French immersion classes at home?
Thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher. I'll start off with the second part of the question, Trustee Edwards, and then I'll turn it over to Superintendent McCauley, who could speak to the gifted classes. So we do have virtual French immersion campus where students are learning. I don't have the exact total, but what I might even do is I could find you the exact number of students in our virtual French immersion campus while Superintendent McCauley is providing you the additional information.
Thank you, and through you, that is correct. It does include gifted. Currently for the 21-22 school year, we do have 26 classes in elementary, 23 of which are with DDSB at home attached to the grade 7-8 campus, and the others are at the 6 host sites across the district.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent McCauley.
And Trustee Edwards, I apologize. I'm going to find the information, but I will send it to you once I have it in front of me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, can I, Superintendent Nevels, would you like to present that information to us?
Oh, certainly. I just looked up the staffing for DAS. It should read 33.58. So I think it was just a typo in the chart, and I apologize for that.
Thank you. That was my assumption.
Thanks very much. I'm just wondering now if there are any additional questions or comments. Seeing none, I just have one quick question for clarification in terms of the requirements. And I'm looking specifically at the average class size for junior intermediate classes, which is 24.5. And recognizing that that would be a ratio of teachers to students, I'm just wondering if teachers who are not assigned classes would be factored into that determination. So examples, teacher librarians and CERTs and ESL teachers, would they be factored into that, determining that average?
Thank you, and through you, Chair Thatcher. So the average is based on actual homerooms. So additional support teachers or coverage teachers would not be included in that average.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I actually just want to follow up, if I may, to Trustee Edwards' question earlier. We have 644 students in our French immersion virtual campus.
Thank you. All right, moving on then to information item 9C and calling on Associate Director David Wright for the update with regards to our technology model. David.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's my pleasure to welcome and introduce this evening our Head of Information Technology Services, David Rule, who is here to present the report through you, Madam Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Associate Director Wright. I'm just trying to get my camera started, but maybe I'll proceed without it. All right, I will do this voice only. My apologies. Good evening, trustees. The DDSB has been fortunate to have had the support of trustees and staff in the implementation of a system-wide technology model to support student learning over the past several years. The cornerstone of this model has been the one-to-one Chromebook program for all students in grades 7 to 12. Key benefits of this program have included reducing the need for textbooks, having a common tool which allows for consistent support to all students, reducing stigma for students in special education programs who require technology as an essential tool of their learning, and equalizing learning opportunities for students regardless of their socioeconomic status. Because of the investment in technology over these past 4 years, the DDSB was uniquely positioned to be able to transition to a remote learning model which supported students and learning over the last 18 months. In October of 2020, a plan was presented to board to update the one-to-one program to include grades 5 and 6, while moving to a support model which relied on families covering the costs of damage to devices by having them work directly with the vendors for repairs. Since then, though, the game has changed when it comes to technology, and there have been a great deal of lessons learned, resulting in the need to revisit the originally presented plan. Some of the major lessons learned were that students are much more capable of using technology at a younger age than was originally anticipated. Damage rates for technology among grades 5 and 6 cohort was higher than was originally anticipated. Leaving repairs to families would result in long-term inequity of access to technology, and the move to family-funded support model for damage to devices would eventually result in some schools having less technology than others. The most significant cost has been found over the years is repairing the touch screen on the devices. Added to the lessons learned, the pandemic has led to a ballooning in global demand for technology and components. This has resulted in significant cost increases for the purchase, support, and repair of Chromebook devices. The Chromebook, my apologies, the cost of Chromebooks has increased over 30% in the last 18 months alone, with significant delays in procurement and timelines. The program, as introduced in 2017, originally cost approximately $6 million per year to maintain, but due to increases, today that same program would cost over $9 million per year. As a result of the information just shared with you, the following technology model is being adopted to ensure long-term sustainability of the program. The grade allocations will remain largely the same with minor tweaks. Kindergarten will remain unchanged with tubs of 4 iPads in each classroom. Grades 1 to 6 will move from tubs of 6 touch Chromebooks to 8 tubs of 8 non-touch Chromebooks. And this transition will happen over 4 years beginning in 2022. Grades 7 to 12 students will continue with the one-to-one program, transitioning to non-touch Chromebooks. Starting in the 23-24 school year, graduating students will be able to keep their 4-year-old Chromebooks upon graduation. The goal is to continue to cover the majority of accidental damage to one-to-one devices through IT services budgeting, though individual circumstances of willful and negligent damage are still at the discretion of the school principal on a case-by-case basis. The revised program moves to a 4-year life cycle for Chromebooks instead of the current 3 years, and allows for the collection of devices from students at the end of grade 8 halfway through their life cycle, so that those devices can be reallocated to the repair and swap pool to support the entire program for the remainder of that school year. This program, given the pricing from June of 2021, is estimated to cost approximately $7.1 million per year. Current stock levels for support for the 21-22 school year are contained in the report for your information. Recollection of devices through the right sizing of technology deployment or recollecting additional loaner devices that were provided to families during remote learning are anticipated to enable IT services to continue to support the program through this year. This means that students will have a replacement device quickly if their device is damaged or stops working. In conclusion, the DDSB is well positioned to continue to support global competencies through the outlined technology model through the 21-22 school year and beyond. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. So I have Trustee Lundquist. Go ahead, Nikki.
Thank you. I have one just really brief question, which is, have we had complaints about the quality of the screens on these new Chromebooks? Because I have heard nothing but complaints about it from the students that I know who have them.
The move from the touch screen to the non-touch screen moves to a different technology for the screen. What people are we have investigated this. We did spend some time last year and did an analysis. What was found was that the screen functions at the same level as a touch screen. The difference is the angle of view. So they're best viewed when straight on at a 90-degree angle. And as you move left or right, it's fine, but as you move up and down, it can get darker. So what we found is that the response time is the same. The brightness is a little bit dimmer than the touch screens, but it's mostly the viewing angle. So viewed straight on, you'll get much the same experience as you would with a touch screen.
Thank you. I will advise them accordingly.
Supplemental, Trustee Lundquist?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Trustee Thatcher.
All right. Trustee Barrett, go ahead, please.
Yes, and thank you, Chair Thatcher. I'll be quick, and it will probably be as much as a repeat from our budget conversations. I mean, I know that there's a strong support for technology within our student base. Certainly, the Durham board was in advance of any sort of technology thrust by the government. The one thing that continues to be able to concern me is the rising costs, the lack of overall funding for this initiative that is certainly continuing to rise year over year. Again, not suggesting in any stretch of mind of canceling the program or scaling it back. But I think that perhaps we could take some of the TD Ontario money and actually buy some Chromebooks for our students, recognizing that the millions of dollars that we spend is well spent, but it is millions of dollars that's taken out of the classroom for an initiative that the government defends, the government supports, but doesn't fund. And so therefore, that's just my political soapbox comment at this point. Thank you, Chair Thatcher.
And thank you very much, Michael. Trustee Stone.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I just had a couple of questions. Are many of these Chromebooks lost? Just students have lost some and we've had to replace them. I just wondered about the cost of that. The other thing is, can we get a warranty that's longer, or I think it's a warranty is 4 years, I guess. So can we get a warranty that's longer, or is that just not worth it? And is there any other device that's less costly than a Chromebook that we could be looking at? And lastly, I just wondered about the pollution from the Chromebooks. How many of these do we throw out, or do we have any kind of place that takes them and reuses them or anything like that, rather than them being discarded into the environment?
Thank you. The cost, there are not, given the number that we have deployed of Chromebooks, and the one-to-one program alone has about 30,000 devices that we have deployed. And I believe that's the one-to-one alone, but I'll verify that. The number of devices that are lost in a year are not a significant amount by comparison to the total amount, but I can find that number for you. The second question, can we get a longer lifespan out of them? As technology gets older and these devices are going back and forth in backpacks and are getting beat up, what we've found is that by the time they hit the 4th year, that's about the end physically. They start to significantly degrade at that point, is what we have found in the past, which is why we've chosen the 4-year and not tried to push that longer than that. We end up spending the residual value of the device, the repairs that we end up spending to keep them going ends up being more than just purchasing a new device at that point. So that's why we've gone with the 4-year, but we did extend from a 3-year to a 4-year, because 3-year we found was they still had another year in them by going to 4 years. In terms of less costly devices, without going to a device that loses functionality, like doesn't have a keyboard, which students find essential, and that's the feedback we've had for the older grades, is the keyboard really is essential. We haven't come across a device that would meet the needs of our students, but we do continue to look for new technologies and different things that we could leverage with students. So at this time, this is the most cost-effective model or device that we've been able to find, and cost-effective in terms of running as well, because the Chrome OS is fairly simple to manage from the back end. And in terms of waste, I would have to get back to you on the numbers in terms of what we are disposing of. Where we can, we do try to sell off all of our technology for at the end of their life cycle, depending on their usability at that point. So if some of them come back and they're completely smashed and unusable, those ones would not be sold for use again, but they might be sold for parts, for example. So
thank you very much.
No supplemental, Trustee Stone?
Oh, I think I snuck in several questions there, so no, thank you.
You did. Okay, thank you. That's great. All right, I'm just looking to see if there are any further comments or questions. I have a question, Dave, and it's around, I was really a little concerned not about the depot model that we had. And my concern is really that students were without technology for long periods of time. And I'm just wondering, and it's around the, I would call it the turnaround time. So when we introduce a new program, I think that what we try to do is to monitor that program, recognize any concerns, and make corrections as needed, modify as needed. And I'm just wondering, were we able to identify this problem last year early on, in order for us to make the necessary modifications?
We didn't. We actually never moved to the depot model in the midst of the pandemic. Ensuring our students had the technology was our top priority, and we pivoted to having our technology supported very quickly by the DDSB. So we never turned around. It was in the analysis of what the program would look like, and in working with our vendors of what the end result of that program would be, that it was determined that it would be approximately a 6-week turnaround where the student would not have a device. And the discussion around the table with our pedagogical colleagues, as well as the IT services team, was that that long without a device, when our teachers and our students have become so accustomed to just having it ubiquitously in the classroom, would greatly impede the ability for students to be able to leverage digital in the classrooms.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dave. So I see no further questions or comments. I'll move ahead to Superintendent Macaulay for the special education plan for 21-22. Hi,
Thank
Andrea.
you. Hi, good evening. Thank you, and through you, Chair. The purpose of this report, which begins on page 11 of tonight's agenda package, is to provide trustees with the 21-22 DDSB special education plan. The special education plan provides an overview of our programs, services, and key information such as roles, responsibilities, our staffing FTE, information on SEAC, and our professional learning commitments, all with a focus on support to students with special education strengths and needs. Our commitment as a district is to center Indigenous rights and human rights. This commitment, reflected in the special education plan, is to examine and reconstruct services to remove discriminatory barriers and address disproportionate experiences and outcomes for our students. This also includes professional learning commitments, examination of practices and resources, as well as continuing to deepen consultation with students and families. Funding for special education and mental health programs and services, as outlined in the special education plan, is included in the board approved budget. With appreciation to the support from trustees, the approved funding for this school year includes $6.7 million above the Grants for Student Needs special education allocation. Our shared focus is direct service to students, and our budget expenditure planning reflects this. The special education plan is posted publicly on the DDSB website, and feedback on programs and services reflected in the plan is welcome throughout the year. This report is provided for information to trustees. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Superintendent Macaulay. Just looking for questions or comments. And I'm going to call on Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. And you know, I always have to make this point when it comes to the special education plan that is required by the Ministry of Education. It's not a plan, it's a report. It's a report of what the board is doing. And I know that SEAC basically does provide input on it and so forth. And I would say that one of the biggest things we've talked about at SEAC that were the K-12 recommendations that is coming forward, the SBC standards recommendations coming forward, and I'm glad to see the actual word of ableism in your report again, because if we look at a lot of those recommendations, it's not around funding, although that is an issue across the province as part of funding, is that there's a lot of work still to be done, and the recognition of that is important in the report. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards and Superintendent Macaulay. I'm seeing no further questions or comments, so I'll move ahead now to Trustee Barnes for the OPSPA report. Go ahead, Patrice.
Thank you. OPSPA has been out as well, so our report is brief. I just wanted to bring to the attention of trustees the information that came out in the last OPSPA email from Jennifer in regards to the COVID-19 guidance update, as well as the school board implementation resource. I think those two resources will be valuable to trustees, and it will forward it to Kathy, and she can forward it out to trustees just in case trustees have not received it as yet. OPSPA has completed their diversity and equity audit. That report will be coming forward to the board of directors in the next meeting, and I'll bring that forward here. Outside of that, that is all that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Barnes. All right, so we have one committee report tonight. So I'll call on Trustee Stone for the Governance and Policy Committee report. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So first of all, I want to thank the trustees and staff for the hard work that's been done on this committee. And it's been a lot of conversation, a lot of back and forth. We've pretty much gone line by line on many of these things, on many of these items. So I want to thank everybody for putting the work in and reading through all the bylaws. And just want to say that the minutes from May 10th are on pages 4 to 17, and the draft bylaws are on page 18 to 117. The committee met on May 10th and on June 14th to finish this work and to get a final draft. You can consider this maybe the penultimate, because we'll be getting another copy for the board meeting in later on in September. So we brought this forward as a notice of motion on the June 21st board meeting for consideration by the board to be held on September 20th. So at that meeting to be held on the 20th, the proposed amended bylaw will be considered on a section by section basis. This is something that can be discussed as to how we address the bylaws. If we want to do it by section, it's been also maybe discussed that we do it line by line, but I don't think that's prudent to do it that way. There's a lot of the bylaws that actually haven't been changed. So what else is coming forward, which will help us make decisions at the board meeting, will be a markup of what has actually been changed. So you'll have the bylaws in their original form, the markup of where it's been changed, and then the final draft of what's been done. So trustees, we can take any questions for tonight, but that was really just for much reading for you to do. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Trustee Stone. So I'll call first on Trustee Barnes. Go ahead, Patrice.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a correction on page 4 under political policy. It reads, the line that reads that trustees can speak with other representatives but need to be careful. I think there's an additional piece to that. We kind of stopped at careful, but I think it was careful not to bind the board or to speak on behalf of the board in those individual conversations.
Which number is it, Patrice?
It's number 8. Second paragraph, second line.
You said page 4?
Yeah, page 4. Sorry, page 17. Sorry. Number 8, political policy. Did you find that?
I don't have that. Did you find it, Patrick?
So page 17.
Yes.
And numbered page 4 at the bottom, page 17 at the top.
Yes.
Section number 8. Political policy.
So you're into section 8?
Yeah.
I think this is the meeting minutes, not in the actual policies. Sorry.
Are you talking about the minutes, Patrice?
Yeah,
sorry.
It's the minutes of May 10th, Linda. You're looking at the wrong thing. I'm sure you're looking at.
Oh, I was looking at the actual.
Yeah,
No,
to Darlene's point, it's the May 10th minutes. Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. I should have been
17 on the top, page 4 on the bottom.
Got it. Okay.
Madam Chair, if I may interject, So I anticipate that there will be more than one issue. Like I have labeled 42 different things as issues, and I don't know that it's sensible to talk about it this evening. So is it possible that if we note problems with the drafting, et cetera, that we can just send in an email to you to take a look at? And because I feel like we will be here for a really long time if we don't do something like that.
I think that's a very good suggestion, Trustee Lundquist. Why don't we go ahead and do that and save some time? And Trustee Barnes, if you could pass that along as well, we can make those corrections in preparation for the
September 20th.
September 20th, and the markup that we're looking for, where we have the new and the old past and present versions. So thank you very much for that, Trustee Lundquist. I think that's a very worthwhile idea. So I'll call on Trustee Barrett. Go ahead, Michael.
I would suggest and would make the motion that if Trustee Lundquist has 42 items that she has looked at within the in the draft, and we've gone through this multiple times at committee level. If there is like 42 revisions, and I know I have a couple myself, I might suggest that it may not be ready to come to board meeting. I would suggest, and I'd make the motion that we refer this back to committee, because I'm not so sure that a board meeting is the right place to be able to look at and revise 42. And if I have 10, there's 52, and maybe they correspond with some of Trustee Lundquist. I would suggest we should probably refer this back to committee. I'm not so sure the board is the right place to be able to look at 42 or 52 potential revisions. I would suggest we might want to be able to, and I'd make the motion that we refer this back to committee.
All right, so you're moving that we refer this back to committee for
further consideration and editing. Yes.
For further consideration and editing. Could I have someone second that motion?
I would second that, Christine Thatcher.
Thank you. Trustee Lundquist has seconded the motion. So is there any further debate? Seeing none. I'd like to ask if there is anyone who would oppose that motion. We have a motion to refer this back to committee for further editing. Is there anyone who would be opposed to that motion? I'm seeing none. So the motion carries.
Chair Thatcher, I just wanted to apologize to both Director Marsh and to Council Patrick Cotter, but I actually feel that it would be a better use of time. But I recognize how much effort's been put into this, Patrick.
Yes, that you feel it's a better use of time, and it seems that the board is in agreement with that. Thank you. All right, we do have a fair bit of correspondence there. Just drawing your attention to that, although it doesn't require any action. As there is no further business, this meeting will now adjourn. Good night, Chair Martin.
Please tell everyone to stay where they are because we are moving into a public board meeting.
Thank you very much. I will adjourn this meeting and we'll move into the special board meeting.
Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. I would like to call this special board meeting to order. You have an agenda in front of you. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. Looking at the agenda, could I have somebody move that agenda? Thank you, Trustee Barrett. Seconded by? Trustee Barnes. We have one recommended action, and that came to us because on our regular board meeting night, we are going to have a federal election. So I am going to ask Trustee Barnes to bring forward her motion. Trustee Barnes.
Thank you. Due to the federal election on September 20th, 2021, I move that the Board of Trustees change the date of the regular board meeting from September 20th, 2021 to September 21st, 2021.
Thank you, Patrice. Could we have somebody second that motion? Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. I would like everyone to look at your reactions. If you support that motion, a green check mark would work. If you do not support, then a red X would indicate that. So I would like to see your reactions, please, and thank you.
We speak to it at all, Chair Morton, or before we take a vote on it?
Absolutely, absolutely. Trustee Brainy, would you like to speak to that?
The only thing I was just going to say, I mean, I'm okay either way, but there have been at least 3 federal elections since I've been a trustee that have been held on a board meeting night, and we've continued with them, and it certainly hasn't been an issue. So I'm sort of in the will of the board, but I just think that maybe it would add to some confusion if we did change it, since the date's been out there for a while. I don't know what type of internal juggling needs to be done too. I would just assume just keep it the same date and just keep it simple, but you know, I'm okay either way.
Thank you, Trustee Brainy. I think the reasoning was that we want to make sure that we provide everybody, staff and trustees, with an opportunity to exercise their right to vote. If there is anyone else who would like to make comment, I would definitely welcome those comments. I see Trustee Edwards' hand is up. Donna?
And I would say that in any other case that I agree that, you know, we haven't changed it. We shouldn't. However, just with the total confusion that schools are being used, honestly, it's just a matter of where you're going to go. Most people are still trying to just got their cards today. It's such a short time, and then where you're going to vote. And if I mean, I originally I didn't think there was going to be an advanced polling, but I see on my voting card that I received today there is. And it's just a real sort of kerfuffle. It's been in a rush and trying to get people moving around, plus the start of school, and people going back to, I would say, back to work, to actually work in some cases instead of working from home. I think it just allows everybody a little bit of a freedom to not have to worry about rushing off back to a board, or people who want to actually watch the board meeting. So, you know, it's neither here. If it was any other year, to me, it wouldn't matter because we haven't changed it. But those are just some of my reasons, just to make it easier for everybody.
Thank you. Is there another comment or another question? Then I need to take that count again, because some of those green check marks have gone down. So I'm looking again, either a red X or a green check mark. Thank you all. Motion is carried. Again, I can say to you, Happy New Year. We are not going back to school. We are going forward to school. And we do look forward to having a much better year this year than we did last year. So I look forward to seeing you on September the 21st. And I don't think I need a motion to adjourn. Consider this meeting to be adjourned. Have a safe trip home if you are not at home. Thank you.